The problem tree is an extremely useful instrument that enables branching of the problem into causes and consequences. The steps in creating problem tree are list all problems related to analyzed area, taking into account that only real or actual problems are not possible for all future ones should be considered. The problem tree model considers first determining the problem, determine which problems are causes and which are the consequences, and then arrange the causes and consequences in a hierarchical order to determine whether they are connected and they are mutual, and then understand their mutual relationship. This is an example of the completed problem tree in business licensing. Government always the major policy decisions in business licensing. So this is a chart that shows the example of problem tree in decision making. So many times the policy decisions are complex, expensive, long, and not transporting license, etc. That is the problem. And the causes, it could be the inefficient capacities, lack of coordination, over-regulated area, a large number of regulatory bodies, no systematic screening, data about the condition, taxes are not centralized, etc. These are the problem, but the consequences could be arbitrary decisions, corruption prone, increased unequal cost of procedure, difficulties to access about data licensing, incorrect and outdated data and statistics, etc. So it essentially captures the problems, and if the problems are, if it has a lot of problem, it has negative consequences which are caused by the problems. So it helps in making a decision, wise decision, policy decision. So then move on to next kind of method or idea that is used in policy making, that is brainstorming. It is closer to it's closer to Delphi, I would think. Brainstorming combines relaxed, informal approach to problem solving with lateral thinking. It encourages people to come up with thoughts and ideas that can at first seem a bit crazy. Some of these ideas can be crafted into original creative solutions to a problem, while others can spark even more ideas. Brainstorming is a process for creating a broad list of ideas in response to an initial policy question or policy idea. The brainstorming identifies two main aspects of in policy making. Uh, One is objectives. Brainstorming aims to develop broad possible range of creative options to evaluate those policy options and select the best policy option in brainstorming. We always, I mean, if you may have heard about think tanks in many countries, there are research groups and research organization which call them as think tanks, which often, though they, while they are engaged in serious policy analysis, but also government very often engages people with variety range of expertise and conducts brainstorming discussions. And in brainstorming, the first is objectives and the second is outcome of brainstorming. Brainstorming will offer better solutions to a community issue and a proposal because a wider range of options has been convinced. If you had carefully noted in the lecture 2, in the very first slide, I showed you 3 slides with the case of Belgium where they adopted different methods of policy analysis. Of the 12 methods of policy analysis, which we have discussed in the previous lecture and today's lecture, the most widely used method of policy decision making is brainstorming. And the next is a focus group and qualitative approach in policy making. So while I am talking about this at the end of policy analysis methods, but these are the most widely used method in policy making because they are easy to implement, and the policymakers always want to make a quick decision, but they rely on experts' opinion and then conduct brainstorming discussions. The next move on to survey research in evidence-based policy making. So I have spent a lifetime in conducting large-scale surveys, health surveys, family health surveys and social surveys, etc. Almost more than 2 decades, I have experience of conducting large-scale surveys. Worldwide, you may have heard how survey research or large-scale surveys, the demographic health surveys, the household expenditure surveys, the income expenditure surveys, the World Health surveys, the World Mental Health surveys, aging surveys, longitudinal studies, etc. Worldwide, you have a huge number of comparative surveys, longitudinal surveys, cross-sectional surveys, which provide an enormous amount of evidence. These are household surveys, enormous amount of evidence in policy analysis and policy research. Large population-based representative household surveys have become valuable resource, important valuable resource to inform public policy in increasingly complex modern world. And I've been directly involved. I have spent 2 decades not only conducting surveys and how these data contributed to policy making and progress in health sector, social sector, or even in other, even in economic sector worldwide. I was associated with a number of international organizations also, such as World Health Organization, etc. How survey data collection has helped enormously in policy making and in progress in different sectors. So survey research provide authority policy since they are considered objective, neutral, and scientific. There are many important questions in the field of economic, social, health policy, which need evidence for policy makings. In surveys or in policy makings, numbers walk the talk in evidence-based policy. Evidence-based policy and practice has infused a range of health and social policy areas. So survey research and evidence policy also, there are many interesting things. For example, the capacity of government agencies to gather and analyze information and to assess the effectiveness of current programs and alternative future options is critically important to evidence-based policy making. Today, every government is uh, undertaking surveys through organizations, survey organization. They are seriously interested in collecting data, gathering survey-based data in policy making. The commitment to better use of research evidence in policy making development and policy making implementation has resulted in governments looking into academics, social scientists, survey researchers to inform health policy or social policy design and delivery. This has also led to emerging body of survey research worldwide focused on understanding the impact of social science research on policy decision making. The last method of policy analysis that we are going to discuss is focus group discussion in policy making. So focus group research, much like the theory and method of contemporary social sciences, regarded as one of the qualitative approach that originated in maybe 4 or 5 decades ago with the pioneering efforts of Paul and others. Focus group discussions offer an alternative method because survey often takes time. Survey research is complicated. Many people adopt qualitative research methods, and one of them is the focus group method, focus group discussion, that offer an alternative method, and either in conjunction with traditional methods or on their own traditional methods, qualitative research methods, interviews, in-depth interviews, case studies, help to avoid oversimplification of cognitive, social, and political processes. Focus group is a carefully planned discussion among a group of people whose objective is to learn about the perceptions, feeling, attitudes, and idea of that group with respect to your defined area of interest. In this case, for a policy area or policy decision. Focus groups provide a perspective on policy problem difficult to achieve by other means. There are 12 methods or more than 12 methods of policy analysis, but if there are no immediate alternative methods, then focus group is an alternative method that can be adopted in policy making. So homogeneous focus group explore issues in depth rather than debating them, and the use of multiple groups permits the differences in stakeholders' positions to be drawn out in detail. So this is an illustration or example of qualitative approach for health policy analysis. Health policy uses quantitative approach in policy making in general. But health policy making also, they also adopt qualitative approach, including qualitative research approach for health policy making. This is one example of qualitative approach for health policy making. So when you have to deal with stakeholders, governance, institutional structures, political discourse, mechanism of power, etc., institutionalization, etc., and there are a large number of components to deal with in health policy in terms of which also cuts across other sectors like social development, social welfare, so values, etc. When you have to deal with a large number of issues and spectrum, then qualitative approach it is one of the approach that can be adopted in policy making. It is one stage in part of the policy making, not the ultimate or the only stage in policy making. So just wanted to highlight in terms of quick policy making in health policy. The Roderick Garcia, he proposed 5 criteria that can be applied to the evaluation of health policy intervention. Yes. He talks about first relevance. Does the intervention contribute to the health needs of the target population? Is it consistent with policies and priorities? Talks about progress. How do actual results compare with projected or scheduled results? Talks about efficiency. What are the results in relation to resource expenditure of the intervention? Fourth, he talks about effectiveness. To what degree does this particular intervention attain its objectives? Fifth, in terms of impact, what is the effect of activity in overall health and related socioeconomic development? This is a simple tool if you are considering a qualitative approach in health policy. So this is also a chart that describes evaluation criteria in public health policy intervention. If you had been careful, noted that I think in lecture 1, I also discussed the evaluation criteria used in different types of policy analysis. For example, I think one of the chart we discussed the evaluation criteria across many policy dimensions, including climate policy intervention. So in conclusions, the broad methodological considerations in policy analysis. We devoted the last 2 lectures discussing, I think, at least around 12 methods of policy analysis. But we devoted time to the concept, futures, essential utilities, and some focus on what they actually do, but not necessarily the important mathematical steps of the math application, etc. So therefore, in terms of these discussion in the last 2 lectures, what are the essential takeaways? So in order to overcome the challenge of strengthening quality and role of policy analytical practices, the policy process needs to be mapped out and timed well by civil servants and policy stakeholders. That is where policy analysis have a big role to play. So this would facilitate carry out policy analysis when needed, at a moment when deemed useful and not just when it is required. So innovative formats of displaying and communicating evidence to policymakers may improve diffusion, as well as involving, for example, specific tools of visualization of the results of policy analysis. I have slides on